One of the biggest questions is, why is there something rather than nothing? Often this is phrased as, where did the material for the Big Bang come from? And that's a question often posed by religious thinkers. In some ways, I don't even really bother trying to answer the question, because leaving it unanswered seems wondrous in its own way. There's an appeal that comes from religious thinking, which makes the world seem magical and supernatural and greater than the mundane reality that we experience every day. And you can get the same from scientific ideas, such as the creation of the universe ex nihilo, a universe coming from nothing. That seems just as mysterious and magical as any possible theistic explanation that you could come up with. And that, to me, seems positive in some ways, but it could be a disadvantage for your philosophical system if you're a metaphysical naturalist. If you think that what exists is the natural world and it can be explained by the laws of physics, then questions such as what came before the Big Bang can seem to break apart this worldview. Of course, one answer is almost like the Zen response mu, which means unask the question, that there is no such thing as before the Big Bang because time began with the Big Bang. But this, like many definitional discussions of the concept of time, fails to really satisfy our intellectual curiosity because it contains within it, like the explanations of time, a reference to the concept of time itself. Time began with the Big Bang. Well, if it began, that means that's a beginning. That seems to be a point in time. The self-referentiality can make the concept incomprehensible. One attempt to address this incomprehensibility is to say it's kind of like asking what's north of the North Pole, but that question isn't so senseless as it seems. Of course, north refers to a direction on the surface of the Earth, but there is space outside the Earth. So is there time outside of time? Doesn't seem like it. But I do have an answer to the question, or a way of addressing it, which isn't simply hand-waving or dismissing the question. To me, it seems like the beginning of the universe and the beginning of time and the material from which the Big Bang occurred and took place is a state in many ways similar to nothingness. And so, when I look at this question, why is there something rather than nothing, I often ask a counter question: why would there be nothing? What would it mean for there to be nothing? What's the difference between nothing and the initial state of the universe? Because the initial state before the Big Bang began seems like, effectively, a state of almost infinite density, of maximum energy density throughout space. And in fact, there is no space, because space exists only to separate different points in space, different events. And space or space-time may not be fundamental at all. So if you imagine the initial state of the universe as there being no space at all and effectively infinite density of energy, there's no differentiation. And it seems to me that perhaps there is no such thing as something or nothing. There exists only the degree of differentiation between two positions in space. We could say there's something here and there's nothing here. There's a gap between these two things. But if, instead of a gap, we had a full universe and there were two holes, in an informational or mathematical sense, it would seem like we have almost the same thing. We have 2 points of differentiation from an otherwise uniform background. So the initial state of the universe seems like one of no information contained within it or being required to describe it. There is no differentiation. There are no regions for things to differ between. Everything is uniform. And the evolution of the universe since then seems to be it becoming more specific. There being more information required to describe it at each moment. So it seems as though the universe itself is an informational or mathematical object, and the initial state of it is the state of nothing being true. See, Wittgenstein talked about things existing and saying this is in some ways meaningless. And that instead of talking about things being real, you could talk about things being true. And Tractatus, he said, the world is a sum of facts, not of things, although he denounced such absolute statements when he became the second philosopher, the later Wittgenstein, and wrote the Philosophical Investigations, where he performed one of the greatest acts of self-criticism. But it seems mysterious and difficult to define when we talk about existence. What does it mean for something to exist? So this question, why does something exist? Why is there's something rather than nothing seems like a false question to me. Instead, the question is, why is anything true? And it seems that in the beginning nothing is true, not even the statement, there is nothing. That's why I often say, why should there be nothing? Why should it be true that there is nothing? Because that is, in fact, a statement. That is the universe being in a defined state. If the initial state of the universe, the beginning of the Big Bang, is a state where there is no truth about it, there is no information required to describe it, because everything's the same and there is nowhere else to go, this seems like a perfectly natural place to start, especially if the universe is composed of information. Of course, the idea that the universe is composed of information is itself kind of mysterious. Where does the information exist? What is its location? What does it mean for it to be made out of information? Is it made of information, or does it just require information to describe it? These questions I can't immediately address, although I can say that information does seem to be a physical quantity, that there are physical laws about how much information can be contained within a region of space or can be required to describe a region of space, or how much information you can store in a region of space if you turned it into a perfectly efficient computer, the maximum information density. And also there are laws about how fast you can transmit information. The maximal speed is the speed of light. Things can move faster than the speed of light. For instance, the image at the end of a laser beam, if you point it to one end of the universe and then you spin around so it's pointing at the other end, it'll take billions of years to reach either of those points, but the time between it going from one point at the opposite end of the universe to the antipode will be almost none. So it will move faster than the speed of light, but it will bear no information. So information certainly seems to have physical significance, whether or not we say the universe is made out of information or simply described by information. To me, there seems to be this fundamental intuition, this connection between information and existence, and the mind and the universe. The mind and the universe seem to be two examples of a single class of phenomena: information storage or processing systems, the space of possible ideas or structures or abstractions or mathematical constructions or theorems or programs. These all seem to be isomorphic to each other. So when somebody asks, why is there something rather than nothing, this doesn't bother me. It doesn't break up my worldview. I'm not a metaphysical naturalist. I'm not committed to any ideology or any cosmology or view of the world necessarily. I just consider them. But this one doesn't seem to be particularly troubling, and it's a relief to me to have something that I can consider which seems to make sense. In the beginning, nothing is true. Over time, more things become true. If nothing is true at the beginning, well, then something becomes true by virtue of that. It is true that nothing is true. We have one true statement. It's like the von Neumann ordinals, where we understand cardinality, the nature of cardinality, the cardinal nature of numbers, the size of numbers. We understand that one number is bigger than another. But what does it mean to have ordinality, that one number is successive, that it comes after the other? And von Neumann defined this as set membership, where we have 0 is the empty set, 1 is a set containing the empty set, 2 is a set containing both of those, so it has two sets inside it. 3 is the set containing the empty set, the set containing the empty set, and the set containing both of those. It contains 0, 1, and 2, and so on. This can be difficult to perceive or understand when you look at the regular notation, but if you think of them as circles, you have a single circle for the empty set, two concentric circles for 1. These two symbols contained within a larger circle or containing object for 3, and so on. And this is the image that I generated for the number 8 in the ordinals. To me, I suspect sometimes that the universe is in fact just the series of these numbers, because the holographic principle says that the universe is in fact a two-dimensional hologram, and these figures that I've created are two-dimensional figures. And as you can see, the complexity of each individual figure increases exponentially. So if you divided the age of the universe into Planck times, where one Planck time is 1 times 10 to the negative 78 seconds or something like that, we would have an enormous finite number. And if you put that into the program that generates these images, you would have an enormously complex one. And I think that in some sense the state of the universe could be represented by one of these figures.